what we're going to do today is we're going to assemble our Sumobot robot PCB. So there are a few components that you'll need to get. One of them is the PCB. You'll need your Arduino, which you've already soldered together. I'll solder that together in this video, but you will already have soldered that together. You'll need three 330 ohm resistors. Now these 330 ohm resistors have a orange, brown, gold band. Now I'm actually holding that the wrong way around for you, so there we go, orange, brown, gold. So three of those. We'll need three 100k resistors, and they are a brown, black, yellow, gold. So if we have a look at that, that's brown, black, yellow, gold. Let's see if we can get that in focus. There we go, ever so briefly. We'll need a single 10k resistor, which is a brown, black, orange, gold. Okay. And we'll need three 100 ohm resistors, which is brown, black, brown, gold. There we go. They're all our resistors. We'll need three coloured LEDs. I've picked green ones. If you wish to have red ones on your robot, you can go for the red ones. We'll need three of the infrared photo diode receivers. So they're the black cased or very dark blue cased receivers. And we'll need three of the infrared photo LEDs. So these ones here are the infrared LEDs, and they've got the clear cases. Okay, three standoffs. These are the large hexagonal shaped standoffs. We'll need three of those, and we'll need 6 of the screws to match those. So these are M3 screws, so we've got those. We also need a push button, which is a momentary push button. Okay, it's got the 4 legs, so this one's got 4 legs underneath it, which is different to what we used in the labs. We used the 2 legs ones, so this is a 4 leg one. And we'll need some of these plastic or nylon standoffs, and you'll notice that they've got a barbed end on them, and they'll go into our board. And our battery pack, and also our little socket set. So this here is for our pin sockets, and our male pins, which are our single inline pins. Okay, so we'll have to cut some of these up. Now the other thing that we do also need is our PPE, so you make sure that you pop your glasses on. Okay, so pop your glasses on, and we also need some cutters and some solder. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these strips to the correct length. So I need 4 3 lengths, and I need a 4 length, and then in the front here I need another socket that's going to go in there. So I'll line them up over the top of the holes, put them in, and just bend them and break them with my finger. Okay, so that's the first one. So that one's a 6-way. I'll need 4 3-ways. So I'm just holding them and snapping them. 1, 2, and 3, and 4 3-ways. Now I need a 4-way. There we go. So 4 ways done. And that's all I need of those. So the leftover, just put that back into the container at the front of the class so the students can use it. Alright, and then what I need to do is I need to cut my strips so that they are the right length. So I'm just lining that over the top of where it sits inside the board, and what we do is we actually lose that last connector. So I'm going to cut with my cutters right over that last connector. Okay, so we actually lose that last one. So compensate for it so that we have the right number of pins. Here we go. There we go. And I do it again for the final one. So just put it in across there, line it up, take that one out, line it up so that it's all the pins are present, and there we go. We'll just cut it. Okay, and the leftover bit, we need those 4 for the front. So I'm going to trim this up a bit. So I'm just getting my cutters and putting them into the ends there, and I'm just trimming up that edge so to make it look a little neater. And I need it to be a 4-way, so I'm going to cut over the 5th connector. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one is what I'm cutting through. And again, I'm going to just trim that up to make it look a little neater. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we've got our 4 ways, we've got our other connectors, we're all pretty much done. That remaining three pieces, 3 little connections, what we want to do with that is just leave that at the front of the class because some other students may want to use it. Alright, so what we'll start with is, I think, our resistors first and work our way from there. Okay, so the first lot of resistors that we're going to use are these that connect up to these diodes here up the front, which is D1, D2, D3. So we're going to feed in our resistors R4, R2 and R1, I think it is, in there. Okay, so it's these sets of resistors that are at the top, and these sets of resistors are the resistors for our coloured LEDs, so green ones in my case, red if you so choose. So they're going to be my 330 ohm resistors. So I'm just going to grab my 330 ohms, and remember those 330 ohms were orange, orange, brown. So I grab the resistor and I hold them between my index and thumb, and all I do is I get my other index and thumb and I just pull down the side, and what that does is it just bends them over, so it pre-bends them to almost the right sort of size. So I'll pop the first one in. Now I like to make sure that reading on the board that I always have the golds facing to my right, okay, so I can read them like as if I'm reading normal text. So I'm going to put that resistor in there, and you'll notice that it's a bit bent up. Okay, what we're going to do is just grab the leg that needs to come down and give it a bit of a pull. Okay, so now that's sitting nice and flat on the board. Alright, so underneath I'm just going to bend over those legs under there, and that stops the resistor from falling out. So I'll put the first one in, I'm going to put the next one in as well. So again, just bending them over, pop the next one in underneath it. As I said, lining up all of those gold bands so that the gold bands are all on the right hand side of the board. Just give that a bit of a pull. Might actually grab some pliers to help me with that. Will I? Maybe I will. I'm just going to grab a pair of pliers so I can pull that leg a little bit tighter. There we go, and bend them over. Okay, let's put in our last one. There it is. Bend our legs over on our resistor. Same orientation. Make it nice and easy to see. There we go. In. Nice and easy. Done. Alright. So one of the tricks that people do when they bend these legs over is sometimes they'll cut them straight away. Now that can be a problem for you, that you might not leave enough material there. And other people, they'll end up bending them so flush against the bottom of the board that when they go to solder them, it becomes also very hard to cut away. The trick there is to make sure that they're sitting at about 45 degrees to the board. Okay, so they're about 45 degrees to the board, and that makes them easy to solder. It holds the component there, and it makes it easy for you to cut them away afterwards. Alright, so I'm going to place the board on the table. Now I've got my soldering iron. It's nice and hot. Now that hot end there is very, very, very hot. Okay, so that's sitting at plus 280 degrees, even more than that. Okay, so you need to make sure that when you are soldering that you are wearing your safety goggles and that you're not going to touch the tip of this iron. Okay, now my iron's on, it's warmed up. Now you'll notice that the tip of the iron is not so nice silvery looking. It's pretty dull silvery looking, so I'm going to give it a quick wipe on my sponge. Now I'm doing this very quickly. You might hear the little bit of the hissing of the sponge, and now that looks nice and silvery and shiny. So key thing here with soldering is always have a clean tip. Okay, always a clean tip on your soldering iron. So I'll grab my solder and we're going to use the rules of 3, and that is we're going to put our soldering iron on the joint. So that's actually using the tip to push down onto the joint, and I'm going to wait 3 seconds, counting to 3. Then I'll add solder, wait another 3 seconds, and then remove the iron. Okay, so there's 3 processes: heat up the joint, add solder, wait for the joint to fully relax, and you'll see the solder relax into a nice join there, and then remove the iron. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, add solder, 1, 2, 3, remove the iron. We'll go to the next one. 1, 2, 3, and another 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and another 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'll move my board around so I can get a better angle on those ends. And you'll notice that actually the tip's starting to go a little bit black. Okay, so I'm going to just give it a quick clean again. Add a little bit of solder if need be. Wipe that off. Okay. And 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3. Now you'll notice that sometimes I'm a little bit quicker in my counting, and that's just due to practice. So I know that it doesn't quite take 3 seconds. It'll heat up a little bit quicker than that. But for first time solderers, count your 1, 2, 3s. Alright, now we always return our iron to the holster, okay? Always, okay? Never leave it on the desk, it will burn through the desk, and more often than not it'll roll off the desk and burn your legs. Okay, so we're just using our cutters now just to cut these little leftover wires of the legs of the components off. And you'll also notice that I'm putting my thumb over the end of the wire, and that's stopping it from flicking out everywhere as well. Okay, so that's another bit of safety there for you as well. So we just have a look at our solder joins, and so our solder joins are all done. Now what you want to see is a solder joint that looks just like this one here. There's just enough solder on it to make a little volcano, but not enough to make it like a big ball of solder. We don't want a big ball of solder, we want it to look like a nice volcano. And if you turn the board over and have a look, you'll see that on the other side the solder has actually started to wick through. Let's see if we can get some focus happening here. There we go, so you can see that it started wicking through the other side, and as it's wicked through the other side, that's also created a little volcano. So if we've got just the right amount of solder, we should just be right. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in our remaining resistors. So we're going to add in our remaining resistors, and our resistors over here, which is R5, R6 and R7, they're the resistors that are going to connect up to our VCC, which is also driving our infrared LED, so they're the clear ones. So that's these ones here, and they're going to be our 100 ohm resistors. So I'm going to go grab them. The 100 ohm resistors are brown, black, brown, gold. So I'm going to grab all 3 of them, and we'll just bend them over, get them ready to go. There we go, there's all the legs bent over. And we'll pop them in, and again lining up all of our gold bands to be in the same direction. Just makes things look nice. So that's one of them in. Let's do the other one now. There we go. And one more left. Our final 100 ohm resistor here going into our board. So this final 100 ohm resistor going into our board is what we're going to now solder. So, well, I should say all three of them are what we're going to solder. So getting our solder, now my iron's been in the holster for a little while now and it's already started to go that dark grey. So I'm just going to wet it a little bit. And when I say wet it, what I'm talking about is wetting it with the solder. So I'm adding a little bit of solder to the tip. Okay, and that's just putting some fresh solder on the tip and re-tinning it. Okay, so I'm going to use the 1, 2, 3 method again. Okay, now it's always a good idea to have the right amount of solder and not too much. If you've got too much, that's worse than having not enough sometimes, okay? Because having too much, more often than not, you're going to end up having a bridged solder joint. And a bridged solder joint means you have to go and remove the excess solder because it's shorted everything out. So just using my finger there to stop those legs from jumping off the board there and shooting across the room. Okay, there we go. Right, so our next lot of 3 resistors are these ones over here, which is R8, R9 and R10. Now these 3 resistors are the ones that are the pull-up resistors of our photodiodes, and you can see that by tracing through one side of the legs goes into the Arduino. Okay, so the other one follows through and into the Arduino, so we can see which ones they are. And so if we go and grab our 100k resistors, we'll grab those, and again lining up our golds so that our golds are all in the same side of the board. Let's finish this off very quickly, and whilst we're at it here, I'm actually going to put in the last resistor, which is the 10k resistor for the for the switch, which is the pull-up resistor of the switch. So I'll do that in one go now. So there's our 100k. All of our 100k's are all in there now. Now I'll put in my last 10k resistor. Now this one, I'm actually going to have the gold band at the bottom of the board, okay? And it's just so that when you rotate the board, okay? Sorry, I should say, when you rotate the board, it's there to your to your right again. Okay, so let's turn that over and give these a quick solder. Again, cleaning your iron, give it a quick wipe and clean it. Add our solder. You'll notice that I'm soldering a little bit quicker now, and that's just due to practice. I can tell when the solder is wetting correctly, and I know when to remove my iron or if I need to add more solder to that join. Okay, with practice you'll get a little bit quicker too. So that one there, I just needed to add a little extra more solder, so I touched it twice, that join. Okay, let's remove all of these excess leads. It's got a little extra bit of length there. Okay, and the next thing that we're going to put in now is going to be these our photodiodes and our phototransmitters. Okay, so our photodiodes, if we track this through, that's the transmitters, the clear ones. They need to be connected up to these 100 ohm resistors. So if we follow through those 100 ohm resistor connections, you'll see it's D6, D5 and D4. Okay, now there is a little flat side that's on the underneath of our diodes. So if you have a look at the bottom side of the diodes, there's a little bit of a flat surface, and the flat surface is right there. Okay, so that needs to line up with these lines that are on our PCB. Okay, so there is the flats on the PCB. If you put them the wrong way, they won't work. Okay, so let's make sure that all those flats are in the right direction, and I'm going to put I'll put the 3 of them in now as I'm going. So clear ones in D6, 5 and 4. Turn them over. Just going to bend those legs out a bit. Okay. Now, we don't want to actually solder these really hard up against the PCB. So now that I've bent those legs, I'm just going to pull them out a little bit and bend over the diode. So pull them out and bend it over. Pull them out and bend them over. And you'll notice that I've just bent them over just ever so slightly. So here you can see that we have just bent them over ever so slightly. We'll align them all later so that they're nicely aligned, but we just want to bend them over a little bit there. Let's turn the board upside down. You'll notice that because we splayed those legs out, they shouldn't move. They did for me, so let me just splay those out a little bit further. Okay. There we go. And the last one. There we go. Alright, now that we've done that, I'll put it down on the table. They shouldn't move. Okay. Let's solder these in. I'm only going to solder one leg of each one. And as I solder one leg of each one, I'm going to turn the board over, have a look. Yeah. And just move them and align them so that they are pretty good. Bend them back a bit, so you'll notice the angle at which they're bent. Okay, so there's just a slight angle. It's not that they're fully bent over, it's just a slight angle. There's a gap underneath them there, and that'll help us with our robot a bit. Okay, now I can solder the other leg. Okay. There we go. Okay, we'll cut off those excess leads. And now we'll put in our photo receivers. So our photo receivers, again, they have a flat side associated with them. So there's a flat that's on the side of the case, and that flat that's on the side of the case needs to be aligned with the flat on the silk screen. And so let's do that. Okay, I'll just double check all of them. Alright, and again I'm going to just bend them over in the same fashion that I did the transmitters, and that just gives me extra working room, okay, so that I can maneuver them into a better location afterwards. So I'll just solder one leg for each one. Go and align them. So this middle one needs to come in a little bit further. So I'm just going to push on it with my thumb and wet the solder joint on the other side and just bring it in closer. I'll do the first one as well. I'm just going to bring that in a little bit closer too. And this last one as well. Okay, so there we go. Alright, so we've got all of them set up. Just aligning them all and finish soldering off on the other side. Trim off our excess. Okay. Now that's on the bottom side of our board. On the top side of our board we're going to put our other LEDs and our strips. Now I think what we should do is we should solder these strips in now, because that'll be a lot easier for us to do that. So I'll put in the two long ones. I'm going to put in the 4-way in the front there and turn these over. Oh, they all fell out. Let's try that again. Put them in. Maybe I'll put the 4-way in afterwards. Let's try just these first. There we go. Alright. Now I'm just going to build up this end area with that 4-way. It's just holding it up. And I'm just going to tack solder 1 or 2 of these. So let's just put a bit of solder on the connector just to hold it. And I'm going to turn the board over and just make sure that they are correct. Now this is when you would put in your Arduino straight into here. Okay, so you'd put your Arduino Nano straight into there, and that would then line up. So here's one I prepared earlier. So we just plug that in, and that aligns all of those pins for us, and we can solder the rest of them. So make sure that you clean your iron. Go through, leaving it time for each one of these solder joins to fully sweat in, so that the solder is fully sweated around the pin, making a nice little volcano. Obviously be mindful that you don't want to burn the plastic of those LEDs as you're doing this. I'm just going to pop that under there, and I'll lift it up for me. So you will notice that I am going quicker than the 3 seconds. Mine needs cleaning again. We keep on going. And we're almost there. Last pin to go. I need a bit more solder. Get my iron clean. Whoop, that one there needs a little bit more. And I think so does that one. We'll just reheat them up and let them re-wet, and we should be alright. Yep. Okay, so let's put in that 4-way connector. I'll take the Arduino out just to make it easier for me, and let's pop that in there. Chuck the Arduino under there. Hold it up for me. Iron a bit of a clean. Okay, all done. Alright, so we need to put in our pins. So our 3-way ones, our 4-way one. I might Alright. Let's put in our other 3-pin. We need those 3-pin headers for our servos. Okay, so what you'll see here is I've actually created a small solder bridge, and that for us is a big problem. So you see that solder bridge that has formed between these 2 pins. So if I get a very, very clean iron, what I can do is I can put my iron over the solder bridge and drag it back, and you'll notice that they've actually separated now. So we can use the soldering iron to wick away, and you can see the little lump of, see the tiny little lump of solder there, which you can put back onto the sponge by wiping it onto the sponge. We can use the soldering iron to wick away excess solder. Now if you have a problem like that and you're unable to get it to wick away like that, call one of the demonstrators and we'll do it for you, or help you with either a solder sucker, or we'll go and get some solder wick, and we'll use a solder wick to remove the excess if there's a real lot. Okay, now let's have a look at this last little connection, which is just in here. There's not enough solder on that one, so let's just, there it is there, sorry I was pointing at the wrong point. There's not enough solder on that one, so we'll just hit it with the soldering iron, warm it up, and that solder reflowed. Okay, and that's good enough. Let's fix that joint for us. Alright, so our last two double connectors need to go in, so our last set of three ways, where are they? Where's our final one? Not too sure where it is, maybe I didn't break it off, that's alright, we'll grab another one. Okay, let's hold these with my fingernails whilst I put the board on the table, and let's solder it. I'm only soldering one of those pins, I'm just going to use that to move it around so that they're nicely lined up, and then I'll solder the rest now. Now these pins, because these are a little bit a heavier pin than the IC sockets, or than the LEDs, you actually need to leave your iron on them a little bit longer. Okay, so you may not have noticed that, but I was actually leaving my iron a little bit longer. Now we're just going to grab this four-way switch, and that goes from the top of the board, and we just align it, push it in. Actually, sorry, no, that goes on the bottom of the board. Doesn't matter if you put it on the top, it's just easier to get to from the bottom. Okay, so follow the silk screen, unlike what I just tried to do then. Okay, let's solder that in. There we go. And our set of final header, which is our 6-way, that sits up the front. So that's a 6-way pin header up the top of the board, and that goes into P4. Oops, just fell out on me there. Goes into P4. Just hold it with my nail. So you'll notice that I'm actually spending a little bit more time on each one of these pins because it needs a little bit more time to heat it up. There's more thermal mass there. Alright, and our final LEDs, which are our indicator LEDs. So find the flat on the LED, there it is, and line that up with the flat in the silk screen. Let's poke those through. Now I'm finding the flats really quickly because I know that the positive, the opposite of the flat, is the long leg. Okay, so I'm actually finding the long leg. Hold those there whilst I bend over their legs. There we go. Pop that down, give them a quick solder. So I'm only going to solder one leg of each one and then align them. Actually, they look pretty good. I'll just push them down with my thumb just to make sure. Yep. There we go. And the last one. Yep. Right, finish off the soldering. There we go. Last one. Done. Snip off the excess. Oh, put my finger in front of it so I don't flick everywhere. Okay, So let's just make sure that these are all aligned. Yep. Alrighty. Now you'll notice that there's a small footprint here. That's for a capacitor. If we need to put a capacitor in, we can put a capacitor in there later to smooth out the supply. If need be, we'll do that. Typically you need that when you're running 4 servos. For the 2 servos it's not too bad. Okay. So the last thing that we need to do for soldering wise on this board is solder in our battery pack. And the way that we solder in our battery pack is we feed our wires in through these holes. So we're going to feed both of them in through the hole that's right next to where it says P1. Okay, so we're feeding both of them in. Then we're going to feed them back through the next hole that's just above it. Okay, and then the red one goes into the positive and the black one goes into the negative hole. Okay, so now make sure that that insulation is pushed right up against the pad. Okay, I'm going to turn them over. I'm going to solder them. Solder the red one, solder the black one. Now turn my board over and have a look. Now that red one is sticking out a little bit, so I'm just going to push it whilst heating up the pad at the same time. I'm going to do the same thing for the black one. Actually I don't need to, but I'll give it a bit of a push though. And there we go. Now I just weave these wires back through. This is called a strain relief. This will stop these cables from breaking right at that solder joint when you are changing batteries from your battery pack. Okay, so we will grab our standoffs. So here's our 3 standoffs. We're going to get our 3mm screw and we're going to put the screw in from the bottom and put the standoff on the top. Grab our screwdriver and tighten that up. Okay, give it a good tighten. Do the same for the rest of the other standoffs. So these are the standoffs that are going to hold our battery pack above our board. Okay. Put our last one in. There we go. Now, our servo motors, we'll need to attach those just before we attach our plate. Okay. So, I've got our servo motors here. Now, I just haven't got the wheels on the servos. Okay, so have a look at the how to assemble those servo motors wheels. There's a video that's online. I'm going to use some of this double-sided tape. Now, I'm trying not to touch that section underneath there because I want to keep it nice and fresh without my fingerprints on it. So I'm only touching the very corner of it. And I'm going to stick that just in here. And that's what we'll use to have our servo hold on from. Again, the same thing, just touching just the corner of the tape, not the whole lot. Okay, so not to put my fingerprints on it. It holds better if we don't have our fingerprints on it. Okay, I will peel away the top red cover. Sometimes it's easier to use the pliers. There we go. See if we can get our last one. There we go. So put our 2 servos on. Wheels facing towards the back. There we go. Stick that down. Now if you've touched the sticky tape, the double-sided tape, they don't stick as well. So now that we've done that, we'll wrap our cable ties around our motor. So we'll grab our cable tie. Now it does work best if the cable tie is from underneath, so where the locking mechanism is. So we just wrap these through the holes. Now you should hear these things zip closed. If you don't hear them zip closed, if you don't hear the zip, now listen. If you don't hear that zip, you've done it the wrong way, the cable tie. I'll pull it over there, and it pays to use pliers to pull this tight. Now, the better you hold these motors down to the board, the tighter you do it, the better your robot will be. Okay, now we cut off the excess. Alright, we do the last one. Remember, we're wanting to hear that zip sound. Okay. That did zip, but didn't quite hear it. Okay, I could feel it. There we go. Pull it nice and tight. And cut off the excess. Don't cut it before pulling it tight, because otherwise you won't have anything to grip onto with your pliers. Alright, so my two servos are attached. I'm going to wrap these cables, these servo cables, I'm going to wrap them around these standoffs. There we go. And what I'm looking for here is the signal wire is the orange, and that needs to go to the S. Oh, we're not quite. There we go. That needs to go to the S, and the brown is the minus side. So make sure you line it up on the connector. So it's brown, red, orange. Okay, and we'll do the last one. Let's see how. No, let's wind it up that way. Is that going to reach? Yes, just. There we go. Let's pop that in. Okay. Now Now our lid will sit on the top here, and that's going to come over and click in like that. Okay, so I'm going to just wrap these wires around the outside like so, and then put the lid on. Where's my remaining screws? There they are. There's one. Two. Obviously I've switched this battery box off so that my robot's not actually turned on at the moment, and making it hard for me to complete this task. So otherwise, if in doubt, don't put the batteries in. Okay, so that's the last one. And flip that over. And click it closed. Okay, so our robot's almost there. The final thing to do is to put in these standoffs in the front, and they're the leveling standoffs. They just go in the outer holes. Okay, so click them in from the bottom, make sure they're clicked in, and pop them in. Alright, and I'll show you in the next video how to align these so that they align with your wheel so it sits properly on the desk.